welcome to the C Team. I'm Mike Curley.
And this is Frank Curley, and our special guest.
Hi, this is Eva Bakshis.
Hi, and this week we're talking about MAGFest. Some of you, no doubt, have already seen the video we put up, but
that visual masterpiece that is going to get an Oscar this year.
I did the camera work. Let's give something for cinematography there.
Yes.
Eva did the camera work. I did the editing,
and I did all the Jack Burtonings.
Yes, very good Jack Burtoning. Some of the best Jack Burtoning I have seen in quite a while, I must say.
About 30 years, I'd say.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a quick video that we did, but we kind of didn't get into the meat of MAGFest, which is the panels. We showed a little clip of John St. John, Wes Anderson, and them saying the name of the podcast, but we didn't really get into.
Very special thanks to all of you. It was just great.
Thanks for humoring us. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for humoring this small project, which will totally make us millions at some point.
Hey, you never know. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little more in depth about MAGFest. Eva got the chance to go to more panels than we did because of some things we had to do.
Family
so
obligations.
she is here to add her perspective on it. So we'll go into a brief history of MAGFest first. This was MAGFest 16. 16 or... Anyway, it started in...
one less than the year that it currently
Well,
is.
it started in 2002, so
every year since 2002. You guys can do the math on that.
But...
And it was much smaller that time, obviously. It was in, what was it, less than 300 people?
265, with 3 bands. Everyone, the mini-bosses, and the one-ups.
Well, you said 3 bands, but there's everyone's there, you said.
And also, it took place in Roanoke, Virginia, and Holiday Inn.
Yeah, much smaller than it is now. Nowadays, it's at the Gaylord Convention Center in National Harbor, Maryland, right across from D.C., and a few more people came this year than that first year, I think.
About, small 21,000 more.
Give or take 1 or 2.
Yeah. A lot of bands now.
Yeah, a lot of bands, a lot of indie developers, a lot of cosplayers, and pretty big-name voice actors. We mentioned John St. John, Wes Anderson.
Wes Johnson.
Wes Johnson.
Yeah, not Wes Anderson. But also, internet celebrities. The Angry Video Game Nerd was there one time.
Yeah.
And, and other people. And once or twice, even Tommy Tallarico was there a couple years ago. He introduced a band called Mega Driver. A bunch of guys from Brazil that mainly play Sega Mega Drive and Genesis stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's gotten pretty big to the point that this year, when it went for the signups both to just attend and to get the hotel, it crashed both times because so many people tried to jump in and get in.
Yeah, so for next year, click quickly.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to get in next year. I'm starting to wonder if they're going to look for a bigger venue or something else.
Well, let's open a panel. Yeah, then we'll definitely get in.
Yeah,
hopefully.
A panel for all the 6 people that listen to us regularly.
Yeah, including someone sitting in this room.
Or vending, I'll point out. Vending is a good way to manage that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Or if we acquire video game machines, since we could contribute those to the arcade. But
Yeah.
Now, back in the day, during a younger time for Mike and I.
Yeah.
Let's see.
8 or 9 years ago.
It was actually in Alexandria in a Hilton in Virginia.
Wait, Alexandria, Virginia?
Yeah.
Isn't that where The Walking Dead is?
Well, not yet.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
And much smaller venue. Between throughout those years, it was between like 1,000 to 2,000, and I'll say I don't miss it.
I kind of do sometimes because it's a little harder to get into stuff now because there's so many people in there.
Right,
so
but
it's just much more crowded.
But that bus, between the hotel and the next, walking is just a lot better.
Oh, well, walking was a lot better when it was not 3 degrees.
Well, it is January, so we're screwed in either case.
This is true. But anyway, the point is, it's come a long way, and one of the bigger parts of it is not just the retro video games or the music, which is still a big thing, but the panels. In particular, a perennial favorite are the voice acting panels. So I didn't get a chance to go to this one, so I'm going to turn the mic over to... Frank, Eva, you guys can talk about what you saw at the voice acting panels.
Yes, and we're going to turn our own mic, because we have 2, to ourselves. And so, old-time favorite John St. John has finally come back after a few years. And he's always a lot of fun. He generally talks about his career. He's actually one of the very first video game voice actors, because it was only really then that the tech could really have voice acting in video games.
Back in the mid '90s with Duke Nukem and all that stuff.
Yeah. So attempts at voice acting have been tried before this time, but he's one of the first big names. Or the first to really make a name, doing this, and he loves the stories like how he became Big the Cat, just the voice the casting person just called him up, and she goes, no, just here's a picture, just do a stupid voice for us, and he goes, oh, Froggy, and she goes, all right, that's it, and Sanjay says, oh, nah, damn it, and so.
I was going to say, it was interesting, too, hearing about a lot of the early roles for the various voice actors. Wes Johnson, in particular, was telling about commercials that he had done. One was for a plumbing service where he got to play the genie of the commode, which was entertaining, and he assumed that it would play once and he'd never see it again. Apparently, it ran for a total of 6 years.
Yeah. And he also... years ago, he told us about one of the worst acting jobs ever done. Because, not just an actor, not just a voice actor, but, regular acting. And he was, for this one grandmother's birthday.
Oh, God.
He had to dress like Elvis, only the way he described it is it looked like porn star Elvis. And he was absolutely at his breaking point and was about to call people on the phone. Like, I'm done with acting. I'm done with it. And then a revelation came to him. Goes, I just survived a day dressed as porn star Elvis. I can survive anything. and so another big thanks to the voice actors, and another fun one. One I was online to ask questions, and someone came up with a story about Mark Hamill, about how he got some roles where he was first like, all right, I got it, and then quickly realized, oh, no, I got it. And
one of those was apparently the Joker.
Yeah.
Really? I'm surprised
yes.
because that's like
that was the one that they specifically gave as the example of, yes, I got it. Oh, shit, I got it.
Mm-hmm. And John St. John, so he asked him, like, did you ever have roles like that? And John St. John, without batting an eye, just went, Big the Cat. And one more John St. John story, because he has several, then we'll move on to Wes Johnson for a little bit, there's a game on the Dreamcast called Blue Stinger. And watching the trailer, he didn't play a voice, he just did the announcements for the trailer. For most of the trailer, he did like the standard prepare for adventure and all of that, and he sounds straightforward. And then we get to the title where he sounds like Blue Stinger. What the story behind that is that he was basically done with it, and then they got to record the title, and the exchange basically went like this between him and the voice director. Blue Stinger. No. Blue Stinger. Blue Stinger. No. Blue Stinger. It just kept going like that, and eventually they basically swapped like blue from take 8 and stinger from take like 30.
It's well worth looking up the original trailer for that as well, just because you can tell the instant where you get out of John St. John's normal voice and into the I have been doing this in the booth for 6 hours, and how many times do you expect me to say Blue Stinger?
Yeah, so when you watch the trailer, keep an ear out. And then Wes Johnson, probably the longest voice acting role he's ever done is Oblivion, since he voiced every single Imperial in that game.
I thought they sounded familiar.
Yeah.
Well, he was voicing them in Morrowind as well. There just weren't as many voice acted lines.
Yeah, it's basically just hi, hello, goodbye.
Well, he was also the voice of the main villain, wasn't he? I recognize that voice.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, the bit where he's just going, "Welcome, Nerevarine. You've made it here at last."
Yeah, but more famously in Oblivion, he did Sheogorath, the god of madness.
Fun guy.
and one of the assassins in the Dark Brotherhood, Lucien Lachance.
Also a fun guy.
Interestingly, for Shea Gorath, he actually said that a lot of people have trouble imitating him because he is mixing deliberately Scottish and Irish. So it sounds like either he doesn't know how to do a Scottish accent or he's doing something just to mess with you.
Yeah,
he's the god of madness. He's messing with you.
I think specifically when he's happy, he's one accent. When he's like angry, he's the other because he's bipolar. He could be like one or the other at the blink of an eye.
That was apparently something that frustrated him with Elder Scrolls Online. They got another voice actor to play that role, and the guy isn't bad at it, but he didn't quite understand what Wes Johnson was doing with the accent in the first place, so he doesn't quite nail it.
Yeah, I don't even think he approached him about it either.
No, they didn't find out about that until later when he realized that his character was in the game and he was not.
Okay.
So these panels, it's all basically they're telling stories about it.
Yeah.
They're telling about their experience, and there's a lot of good stories that come from that.
Okay. Now, actually, why don't we take turns? Why don't you move on to Zelda because I wasn't there for that.
Okay.
panel.
So one of the panels I went to was kind of a retrospective postmortem on Breath of the Wild with
great game.
with spoilers. Yeah, game of the year declared by literally everybody.
Yeah.
So it was kind of looking at the game from a design perspective, a story perspective, and kind of what went into the game, what went right about the game. And the general conclusion was that this is kind of the Zelda game that Nintendo's been trying to make for the last 30 years. That the technology has finally caught up to the point where they could make the game that was all the exploration that they wanted to back in the 80s. And as for what comes next, it was kind of divided. We didn't have like a clear answer from it of what comes next. How do you top Breath of the Wild? I know I would like to see something that picks up like right after, where maybe expand the world some more, maybe they go on to another continent, or something that continues that story. But it was a look in that perspective, what made this as good a game as it was. And it was a whole combination of things. It was the wide open environment, shirtless Link, at least two panel goers thought that was the major highlight, or the secret sauce, as one of them put it. Yeah. And, that kind of customization, while also being relatively simple. You can customize a lot, you can explore a lot, but as far as game mechanics, though, you have the swords, you have the shields, and you have the bows, and not a lot of, real variation there, aside from, elemental stuff and different bonuses.
Well, it gives you a lot of like bread and butter stuff. Like the combat, is pretty straightforward. But but you can mix that for after stealth screws up.
Yeah, the game lets you play it almost however you want, and I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like Dark Souls in that respect, where you have some fairly simple mechanics, but the execution of it is pretty solid, and there's a lot you can do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just the general consensus was consensus. I can say that word. It was just a very well crafted game, and that the technology has finally caught up to the point where Nintendo can do with it what it had wanted to do. Because you look at the previous games, like Ocarina of Time, you step onto Hyrule Field, and that's like the biggest, most open field that you've seen in a Zelda game up to that point. Same thing with Twilight Princess. It made it much bigger. Or the Wind Waker, you have the whole ocean to play with. And now it's finally a giant open world that you can take any direction you want. And that's kind of the spirit of Zelda in a nutshell.
Yeah, Skyward Sword really broke me in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a good game, but to me, it's a lot of problems that previous Zelda games had, but it didn't get that bad up to that point. One, Breath of the Wild, it just kind of cuts you loose. I mean, yes, you are stuck in this area for the first half hour, but it's still very much mechanically what you're going to be doing throughout the game. Skyward Sword is a very slow burn, and it spoons feeds you so much that you're never really cut loose until much later. Mm-hmm. To me, where in this one is like, all right, short cutscene. You step out into the world and
Get through the tutorial.
find your way through. And I was playing a little bit of the original Zelda game earlier. Me and the old man. First thing. Due to not even like an arrow pointing to it, just a very obvious interesting visual thing that catches your eye immediately. In Breath of the Wild's case, it's the campfire. That's like one of the first things you see.
Yeah, the game's very good. Breath of the Wild is very good about telling you what to do without telling you what to do.
Yeah,
it's very good in the sense of the physics in the game are consistent enough that you start to just understand things on an intuitive level of, okay, I have to get this here. What tools do I already have that can do it? So there's very few points where you have to like check a guide to figure out how a puzzle works, because they all work on the same physics.
Yeah.
So I think we've done an episode on just Zelda already, so I'm going to kind of move on to some of the other
Actually,
panels.
I don't think we have.
Didn't we?
No, we didn't.
Oh, we'll have to have one.
Yeah, maybe next time.
Okay, so another panel that you guys went to was the empathy in video games?
Yes.
Yes.
And this one in particular, it featured James Portnow of Extra Credits, which is a series of videos about game development, analysis of storytelling in games, just general gaming. Though they moved on to a series called Extra History, which is through that same art and narration style, retelling histories like the Warring State periods, the Punic Wars,
Okay, so
etc.
So he's hosting this panel.
Yeah,
He certainly wasn't the only one on there, though.
he's just one of them.
There was a woman, I'm completely blanking on her name, but she is devoted towards increasing game design towards empathy and towards inducing empathy in other people. There was one woman who is actually a medical anthropologist who primarily makes video games designed to help doctors and family members empathize with those who are either dying or in chronic pain or in the process of grieving. And then there was another person there who primarily makes games for human resources simulations.
Like hiring and jobs?
More handling job cases that happen within.
Okay.
So how do you best handle people?
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
And also, to some degree, job training and empathy training within that. All of this, you can see how it plays into using games to help understand the human experience.
Mm-hmm. So what were some of the things that they talked about in this panel specific to games?
Well, specific to games, I'll just list. Okay, so ActRaiser, I played through that game recently, and it's basically a mix of platforming and world management. Basically, you're a god trying to. The force of light and darkness, butt heads, and you lost, and you're trying to rebuild the world.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah. So you're trying to rebuild it from scratch, trying to defeat the forces of darkness at the same time, and the most direct communication you get from the people is through them praying to you. And now ActRaiser and other related games by the same company,
Quintet.
Yeah, Quintet. Was brought up in a video by Extra Credits. So I asked, James, what does ActRaiser have to do with empathy? And we basically established that ActRaiser, you are deliberately detached from the people you're taking care of, so you don't really feel empathy with them. You're sympathetic toward them. They're trying to rebuild the world while being attacked, etc. But really, the empathy is toward your main viewpoint. The main viewpoint character, which is just all powerful but lonely. Like you can't really relate to anyone. And once you finish your job, once the forces of darkness are gone, he goes, all right, job's done, and you basically leave the world, establishing that their praise toward you is ended. But shouldn't that be humanity's goal, to be beyond needing divine help and just moving on their own? And so the empathy is again, very detached from the people, but more just with your own position.
A different perspective from more of a design standpoint came in with how you present games to encourage empathetic behavior within the game and to see if you can get that to carry through into real life. And there are a lot of studies that are being done on that haven't really concluded anything. But one thing that they were going on was how you encourage empathetic behavior and not just going through behavior for a reward. Because a lot of games, you'll notice they have the good-evil dichotomy, which it's kind of hammered in a lot of times. And it makes
the moral choice?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't do a lot to actually change anyone's behavior since it's so over the top.
Yeah, but particularly with the Fable games, which, this school of heroes accepting evil quests for some reason.
Yeah, a
That
lot of
was
them.
bizarre.
It's a lot of them.
Chicken
chaser?
Beyond that, that's digressing a little bit,
But yeah, a lot of the sense I get is a lot of the moral things. It's you could be a jerk and get like 3 gold, but if you're good, you're eventually going to get like a bunch of experience, a new sword, and the 3 gold you would have gotten anyway.
That does happen a lot. One thing that they were going over was how to reward this behavior. And one thing that was brought up was the idea of rewarding good behavior with additional content. And I'm going to use The Witcher for an example because we've been playing a lot of The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
There are a lot of quests that you have the option of going through, helping someone, or doing something. Or you can just announce, I don't have time for this, and leave. And you can do that, and it's a really boring way to play the game because most of the content comes from actually helping people and empathizing with them. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a good person throughout all of it either. There are a lot of sympathetic but objectively terrible people that you encounter in this game. The Bloody Baron, for example, is an abusive alcoholic, but you also see him as an incredibly sympathetic and ultimately easy to empathize with character through seeing his behavior through various circumstances. You have the option of completely calling him out on his shit. I mean, you can also sit down and say, yes, I fully understand why you did everything. It's all justified. Or you can just say, no, you were an asshole and this is all your fault. But the choice to actually go through and do any of that is really your reward for caring enough about the person and about the world to actually get involved. And it's like this with the side quests, too. Most of them, as far as I can tell, you cannot go back to them. It's if you leave the people to die, they die. So as content, you cannot reclaim if you decide that you just don't care.
Well, another interesting quest is one that involves a werewolf. Basically, this man is waiting for his wife to come home after disappearing in the woods, and his sister-in-law is trying to convince him, no, she's gone. So you look into it, and you discover that his sister-in-law lured her own sister toward where this man hides when he becomes a werewolf. And and the wife gets killed because she wants him for herself. And at that point, you have a choice between letting the werewolf kill her, which a lot of players do, or doing your job and killing the werewolf who's now endangering someone. And yeah, as far as empathy goes, I kind of feel for the werewolf. She's insane.
Well, it's a matter of we had a werewolf who wasn't particularly a danger to anyone. He actually had this all under control unless someone else meddled in it. And then you have a much more direct monster, a person who is willing to make her object of affection into a murderer for her own selfish ends.
Yeah, so the monster is not necessarily the one who is covered in fur and with fangs.
Yes.
Right.
Which is a common recurring theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not just in this game, but other games. But what kind of stuck me is Geralt as a character would be the happiest man alive if he didn't get embroiled in other people's politics and just did his job hunting monsters. And then you have situations like those where it really clings at his heart, like.
Yeah, he's actually got to feel and be human for a while.
They keep announcing that the Witcher mutations eliminate emotion, and I don't know where they're getting that from. That is complete nonsense.
Well, he's...
Well, yeah, I know it's supposed to be in universe too, but...
Well, it's he's very gruff and very like dry about a lot of things he says. But there's one moment where he finds like a
Spoilers, by the way.
yeah, spoilers by the way. He's basically looking for his adopted daughter, and finds someone who basically asks the king for prostitutes whom he kills. In a very like twisted kind of way. And that is the most like angry I've ever seen him in this entire game. And I'm like 60 hours in.
Yeah. So you guys feel? Do you agree with like kind of that conclusion that the way to induce empathy is with the extra content, or is there like other modes? Because I'm thinking kind of back to Eco, back on the PlayStation 2, where you have like a lot of empathy for Eco and sympathy for Yorda, and there's a sequence toward the end of that game where Yorda is injured, and if you run, she falls over, and it's a long sequence. You have to walk with her. I mean, you can run. It is probably faster even with her falling over. But like when I got to that point, I didn't want to. I didn't want to hurt this little imaginary girl. So like, but that's not something with extra content, but the relationship through the game.
Well, I think it comes down to especially with empathy, show don't tell works the most. Like going back to ActRaiser, you're being told the stories of people fighting and dying in order to keep the civilization going, but you can't empathize with it because you're not seeing it. Like Eco is a very visual game, like and alongside Shadow of the Colossus as well. There's a lot of like showing, and in The Witcher, the voice acting and the animation wasn't as strong. As far as animation, it's definitely stronger than what you would see in say like Dragon Age, where it was a bit of a stiffness to it. But the delivery of those, showing, what these characters are going through, that's I feel that's where empathy really comes in. Because if you just very robotically, I am a werewolf and I tried to hide myself and now my wife is dead, that wouldn't do, because you're not showing anything, you're just spitting out narration.
Of course, it depends on the kind of game that you are playing as well. Other ones, such as for one that was brought up on the panel, That Dragon Cancer, are more a direct storytelling route where you're playing through the experience, and the whole point of the experience is to develop empathy through it. One thing that was brought up too is there's a difference between putting someone through a metaphorical simulation of this and actually traumatizing someone. You'll run into a bunch of people, particularly in the virtual reality spheres of, I know how we can make people empathize with anxiety. Let's put people through a virtual panic attack. No, that's...
Panic attacks don't work that way.
One, it doesn't work that way. Two, that is needlessly cruel and traumatic, and it doesn't induce empathy. It just makes you hate the person who made you go through it.
Yeah, I think a definite line needs to be drawn. I mean, we've been telling stories for basically our entire civilization. Maybe VR isn't...
Well, it was pointed out in the medical sphere. I think I just tapped the mic there. Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it.
But in the medical sphere, one of the empathy games that they have is to help people understand chronic pain. And within the game, they actually will disable the use of your limbs when you can't manage a certain action because of pain or exhaustion. And they actually found that people before and after playing that game were much, much more likely to help family members and even strangers dealing with pain complete tasks that they were struggling with after playing through. So a metaphor can work a lot more reliably than putting through the actual experience. So yes, rewarding with more content is one way to do it, but there's also the option of making content that you are only playing through to gain more empathy or a better perspective.
Sort of like a walk a mile in their shoes kind of thing.
More or less, but without, traumatizing the person.
Yeah, we don't need games to traumatize people. I think games have a bad enough rap in some circles already.
Yeah. I mean, no one's complained about Doom in quite a long time. And the funny thing is, I kind of felt like before God of War was announced, it began to crop up a little bit. Well, Jack Thompson and that whole school. But when God of War came out, no one cared really.
Yeah, it was a little. It was way too direct for anybody to say, "Oh yeah, this is supposed to be for children."
Yeah, yeah, like San Andreas had like a hidden sex scene that you had to hack into the game in order to find because it wasn't they at the last minute decided to like cut it out. That got all the controversy. God of War, not touching it for some reason.
So anyway, another panel that I went to, I was only in the discussion for a little bit, but it was about humor in games. The discussion seemed to mainly focus on almost on unintentional humor more than like trying to make a game funny, because like a lot of what they focused on was like streaming communities, let's plays, and stuff like that, where the humor comes from someone being frustrated by a bad game. We ended up talking, I brought up a game called Immortal Redneck that is, it's a first-person shooter and a roguelike where the premise is you're a redneck in ancient Egypt. That's basically it.
So like Serious Sam.
Yeah, it has a lot of that similar style, but the hook of the game is it has stream and Twitch compatibility, where periodically, like every couple minutes, a choice comes up for the people watching the stream. They're given a choice of 3 enchantments that may be buffs or debuffs, and the humor in that game comes from the guy playing has no say in it. So the people watching vote, and we made everything explode. Like everything he shot exploded. Enemies, barrels, whatever. Another one with like half the enemies he shot turned into chickens. And you can mess with them. There was one he had on for a while that turned all the text in the game, including the ammo counts, into hieroglyphics. So he had no idea what was coming in any sense.
Yeah, this reminds me of some developers' methods against piracy.
Yeah, there's a little Schadenfreude there.
Yeah, when if you illegally copy some games, your gun will fire chickens for some reason.
Yeah, so a lot of the humor in that game comes with less with what's in the game and more with messing with the player who's playing it. And there were a lot of ways to do that. Another sequence, first we gave him a double jump, then we gave him a buff to damage while he was double jumping. And then we made him damage himself every time he double jumped. So a lot of the humor, again, came from the community, and it's kind of hard to make a game that is just funny on its own, because like you can throw in absurdities like the chickens, but that's only going to go so far. A lot of humor deals with situational stuff and reactions and timing that is in the control of the player. If you have something like Half-Life, where the player always has control of the camera, and you put together this skit, it could fall apart if the guy looks the other way, or if a dialogue prompt doesn't come up, and timing with games has always been tricky because of just the nature of cutscenes. Where how many cutscenes have you seen where someone has a line of dialogue that cuts off? In a movie, it would cut off immediately by someone cutting him off, interrupting. But in the game, it's like, hey, you can't do... Yes, I can. There's that conspicuous delay that is only starting to be kind of overcome in recent years.
Well,
I think Mass Effect 3 in particular... The Mass Effect series in particular is very good with that kind of humor, like movie-like humor, especially the Citadel DLC. There's a whole scene in there that might as well have been taken from The Hangover. It's got, for a game, perfect comedic timing. So I think that's kind of that's what I took away from this panel, that a lot of the game humor comes from unintentional stuff by the game and from the players, because it's very difficult to have consistent comedy in a video game.
Well, the characters getting interrupted in the bad timing, that's definitely more in the case of like a BioWare, style, RPG.
Well, a lot of games, anything with spoken dialogue before about 2005, it would be like that. Like, look at Sonic Adventure 2, did that a lot. Or both Sonic Adventure games, really.
Yeah, but then I think of like Uncharted, where whenever you get to a cutscene, any comedic moment is well timed because they basically film it like an animated movie.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's gotten better. It used to be they line up the sound files one after the other, and there would be the conspicuous pause as one loaded up.
Yeah.
I'm saying, yeah, it has gotten better as they've gotten better with it, but I think there's still, in some cases, it's a technological thing.
Well, I want one extra credit things I watched, discuss that, how do we make humor, specifically for games? Like, even if you watch, even you see a joke in Portal, that's still, a joke that could also work in cinema, because it's written, it's a set piece, rather than, through like the actual gameplay of the game. And they point out, they put a little disclaimer, this video came out before Goat Simulator.
Which is in its own right a masterpiece of absurd humor.
Yeah.
Just because the physics are ridiculous.
They're broken.
You are a goat. And everything can explode.
Yeah, well, part of the advertisement is that hundreds and hundreds of bugs. And I played a bit of it, and again, a lot of the humor is just you screwing around with a very broken-looking game.
Yeah, so that I guess would be humor unique to video games, is humor that involves the player and the player's responses. Like Dark Souls is, I think, one of the examples of the unintentional humor, where you have the blood stains where people died, so you check the blood stain, and like literally everybody who's ever played the game fell down this shaft.
Yeah, so you see
in the same way.
So you see all these ghosts charging in like they're about to stab someone, about to just ambush somebody. One of my some of my favorite unintentional glitches are from the Elder Scrolls series.
Yes.
Yeah, they brought up glitches a lot, where like a lot, how many videos on YouTube is like, let's exploit this glitch and see what we can do with it.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of wish this was a scripted event. I really wish this wasn't a glitch, but it was, and they patched it out. In one of the expansions, a Dragonborn in Skyrim, you're getting, there's a series of quests where you're basically, someone's excavating, for basically grave robbery, and they keep on digging deeper and deeper, and you have to keep on clearing out all the Draugr as they go deeper. At one point, the messenger they sent me wore nothing but boots, his underpants, and one of those Santa Claus style, Norse hats. And it's like, yep, have a message for you. Goodbye. And I want to know that guy's story. Like, did his house burn down? And he's like, well, I got to get paid somehow.
He had a really interesting trip between the message and getting to you guys, I guess. That's the best I can come up with.
Is this the ending of this guy's story? Just he finally got his job done.
He hands you the note, and then he goes for a really stiff drink.
Yeah. And
so, but you said that's a glitch. He was supposed to wear like a normal outfit, and they patched it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And
Oh, well.
And the thing is, that's a story in of itself, because here we are in the middle of the cold north, because it's Skyrim, and only big white frost resistant people live there.
Yeah.
And he's stuck in his like underpants.
Well, yeah, a lot of your humor, like there's the whole story with Civilization and Gandhi, the warmonger.
Genocidal Gandhi.
Yeah, that was a glitch in the first one, and they rolled with it, where, for those of you who have not played the original Civilization, Gandhi was set toward like maximum pacifism. Or no, he was set toward minimum aggression because he's Gandhi. That's his thing. But there was a chance that certain conditions of the game would lower his pacifism like one step further. And because of the way the game was coded, it was the hexadecimal thing, so the normal scale was 0 to 10 in aggression. Gandhi was normally at 0, but because it's hexadecimal, if you went to -1, it actually shot him to 255. So on a scale of 1 to 10, Gandhi was 255 in aggression. And it was so hilariously out of character for Gandhi that it's been a staple of the game ever since, that once you get to democracy, Gandhi wants to destroy the world, apparently. So, and that's one of the funniest, stupidest things. It came about because of a glitch people noticed. So that's, I guess, I don't know if we can come to any conclusion, but a lot of humor in games is at least starting unintentionally.
Yeah, it really depends on the game. Like in an RPG, I'll be honest. I've laughed more at like a BioWare RPG than I have at most like deliberately comedic games.
Yeah, the only deliberately comedic game I can think of is Mad Hazard.
Yeah.
Eat Lead: The Return of Mad Hazard, which is it's basically it's a mediocre shooter, but its charm comes in it being a parody of the video game industry as a whole. And it's well written, it's got like good voice actors, and it does have good timing, and it messes with you too, because the premise is you're playing as a character who knows he's in a game. So there's at one point you have to repeat a boss fight because the villains are hacking the game and won't let you continue. And there's a lot of that kind of self-referential humor where, you know, if you're in the loading screen with the elevator and you hit a button, the character talks to you to tell you, look, if you had anything important to do, you wouldn't be playing a game, so just chill out. And that's the one example of like just a deliberately comedic, almost like, you know, movie style comedy in a game.
Yeah.
So,
well, I would argue that maybe it's just from the perspective, but you know, one thing that Valve has mastered is just, you know, storytelling through a first person perspective.
Yeah, they've been very good about that.
And I would argue that, I mean, I know we have Hardcore Harry now, so, you know, first person.
Henry.
Whatever. So that's not really exclusive to video games anymore, but I will. It still kind of you know requires your input, because you are, you know, going through the, even if they are set pieces, you are going through this. And, you know, one big joke in Portal 2 is Gladys decides to like hack into this one spring and just not let it adequately get you as high as you need to go. And as you're going up to one of the, as you keep, you know, jumping up, one of the cores keeps trying to warn you about what's going on.
So you know, humor in games, it's tricky. A lot of games do it well. Some games not so much. But anyway, any other panels that stood out to you this year? Because those are the two I went to for the most part.
There was one that I went to while you two were off doing other things, which is focused on games that are about things other than fun. Since it's kind of absurd to announce that an entire medium needs to be, well, fun, exactly. You wouldn't say that about movies.
Mm-hmm. Like Schindler's List. That's not fun.
No. But being things other than fun doesn't make them any less valuable. The title of the panel was actually Romance in Games, since romance is rewarding in its own right, but it's not necessarily a fun experience per se. And they went over things like one game that was just a little thing on an iPad that pretty much came down to Twister for your fingers. And by the end of the game, you have ended up locking hands by following the instructions. Which is interesting. It's also not necessarily a fun thing to do, but it does create an emotional response.
Well, I'd say every form of fiction needs to be engaging, even if it isn't fun. Like, again, Schindler's List. You know, that's not a fun movie to sit through. Like, I'm not going to...
But it's compelling.
Yeah, it's compelling. Yes. It's, you know, like a lot of soap operas. Like, I am absolutely sick of every character in there, but somehow I'm glued into it.
Well, soap operas, I think we're going back to the absurd humor and unintentional humor thing there.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying, where drama is not necessarily fun. And that's something I've said about The Walking Dead, is only in the last couple seasons has it become fun as opposed to dramatic.
Yeah, like the third season was a lot more fun than the second one.
Yeah, or the more recent ones, you know, where particularly the episode that introduces Jesus is outright hilarious, and that's not a pair of words I would have associated with any part of The Walking Dead up to that point.
Anyway, what remains of that panel was devoted to how to elicit responses other than fun and what experiences exist outside of the virtual sphere that can be adapted to that. One that we brought up, actually, Frank and I do the New Jersey Renaissance Fair, and part of that is basically acting as the non-player characters for quests that children are on, which can be, at times, genuinely hilarious. It's always engaging, but it's also incredibly exhausting and not necessarily a fun experience. rewarding, certainly, but not fun. And there was some discussion of how to incorporate that experience of facilitating the quest for other people rather than undergoing the quest yourself, and how that could actually be adapted into virtual work instead of just in the physical space.
So almost something like NPC, the game, where you're somebody who, you know, you say the same line to the fighter every time he comes into the town.
Possibly, or not even saying the same line to the fighter as they come into the town, making it almost an acting experience there instead of just the same cue given before you sell them the stuff.
Well, it kind of gave me an idea of you know, an MMO where some players are managing like the town or base that they're at, and they're sending other players to do the actual like, you know, the mission, the questing and all of that.
I feel like some games have tried that. The problem is nobody wants to sit around in town and manage the store.
Well, make it.
I will point out EVE Online exists, and that one
yeah.
pretty much comes down to battle spreadsheets, the game.
And I would argue that in XCOM, the you know turn-based battle, the base management is just as engaging as a turn-based battle, because you're constantly trying to build, you're trying to keep up with the you know the aliens that are trying to kill you.
But you are still directly contributing to something you are doing. You're building up yourself. Would you necessarily play an XCOM game where you were only doing the base management and somebody else, where you had the option to go out and shoot aliens, but you did not? Where you managed the base and other players did all the actual like fun stuff?
Yes, absolutely, actually.
Okay.
Honestly, isn't that a lot of what the Civilization games are? You don't get to fight. You're directing it. You're building the towns.
You are, but you are still making the decisions on where the fights happen, and it's still a strategy game where you're giving the commands.
Yeah, giving the quest.
You're giving the quest, but you're making all of the relevant decisions. You're proposing with the MMO more something like, well, I'm going to manage the store. I'm going to work the store. I am not going to have any direct part in actually fighting monsters or saving the world. So that's kind of like a different. Like in XCOM, you still direct the missions. In Civilization, you're still directing the armies and the direction of your civilization. Whereas, you know, I would say a lot of players would not want to just. There might be some who do want to just sit and mind the store, create potions and herbs for everyone else, but it's hard to enforce that kind of balance.
Actually, there is a game that I encountered that handles that relatively well recently. It was actually a free-to-play game called Puzzle Pirates, of all things, which more or less, it's a series of mini-games, but the mini-games also allow you to be the shopkeep, and other players can actually come in and buy stuff from you. And you sit there and create stuff just throughout it. Or if you're going to go to a fight, you need to actually sail to the fight. And the process of doing that is somebody needs to mine the bilges. Somebody needs to repair the holes in the ship because this thing is the leaking rust bucket. Somebody needs to actually handle the rigging. And yes, each of them is a mini game, but the mini games themselves are not particularly interesting unless you want to. But if you want a match 3 game with an interesting skin that also facilitates the quest for other people, and there are more exciting things to do. There are combat games within it. But you can also just sit there, finish your match 3 things, and sell people shirts or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, there's also, you know, the bridge simulator where I guess
Bridge as in the card game or
in this
ship.
case, Starship Command, basically.
Oh,
This is
okay.
one that we played not this year, but last year. And
Oh
it's
yeah,
worth
I've seen
bringing
it
up,
there. Yeah, I've always wanted to try it. But I
It's
keep
fun.
forgetting.
Yeah, and I guess if you keep it like a small team, maybe not an entire city per se, but have someone who has the ability to see problems happening, and say, oh, there's a monster hive, you better go get it. It's about such and such clicks, that way. Yeah.
For people who have not had the opportunity to see the bridge simulator, it more or less comes down to you and a team of, I think, 5 other people are in charge of a starship, and each person is manning one post. So you have a communications officer who manages both communications with the enemy, which had its own fun, punny humor, and with the actual starbase. And if they mess up, they can insult the starbase and get blown up. You have a weapons officer who is purely calculating where things need to go for the weapons and for the attacks. You have a navigation officer who is essential to actually getting the ship in position to attack or to the star system where it belongs. And you have the captain who's directing everybody to actually juice off, because if they're trying to figure it out on their own, it's not going to work.
So it's basically a team effort to almost role play as a starship command, like Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever.
Exactly, much more Star Trek than Star Wars.
Well, yeah,
and especially for the captain of the ship, every other member is in front of a computer screen. He isn't. He's in the back, kind of viewing, the bigger screen, in front of everyone and what everyone's doing.
So he's depending on everybody else to be able to do their jobs and report to him, so he can make decisions based on what they're saying.
So in a way, he's giving little quests. To his officers.
Okay.
Even if that quest is just, please move us down and to the right so that we can actually get our phaser cannons in position to shoot the Klingons or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have to try that, because I've seen it a few times and I keep wanting to, but I always see it on the way to something else that's happening in like 5 minutes.
It's well worth doing, and also they give out the MAGFest coins for doing it. So.
Okay. That's cool. Okay. So, what were you going to say, Frank?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So other things happened in MAGFest that we kind of covered in the video. I was part of the wizard party, the world record that I was basically all but conscripted into, because I was dressed up as my character from my novels, and someone spotted me, recognized me as a wizard. Obviously, they had no idea what I was from, because I think 6 people have read my books, and I had to get a hat. Because I needed a hat or a beard, and I did not have a beard. So I got a Link hat, which is pointy enough to count. And yeah, we got the world record. It was originally, there was some screw up with the counting, where it was originally announced as 630, but the actual number was, I believe, 562 that they posted on the website. Still, it was more than twice of what the original record of 252 was. So that was a good time. There was concerts going on by the Mega Man Marathon, and people got drunk afterward, because wizards. And
a wizard is never late. They're sometimes drunk.
Yes, this is true. Other things, the computer museum, which I took a quick look around. They have that every year, where it's not necessarily video games, but computer games. And we're talking, I'm going to date myself here, the original Apple green screen Oregon Trail. Or the math games, and up through some more recent stuff. I saw somebody playing Dark Forces, Doom, Quake, Wolfenstein, and all of those are also there.
One thing that was nice for me to see was the old Commander Keen game, which I remember from the shareware days. The version that I had of it, at this point, the screens were all cyan, magenta, and yellow. The version I had of it did not include the yellow, so everything was this blue-green color and this purple color, white and black. It was actually kind of bizarre for me to see it in full color, but it was nice playing it again.
Yeah, and I decided to try my hand at Wolfenstein 3D. My hand really hurt. The controls were pretty awful. This is before... okay, kids, this is before WASD became the absolute standard for anything from a first-person perspective. You need the arrow keys. Right and left did not strafe. It turned you. You need to press another button with the same hand, presumably, in order to activate strafe, and then you can strafe. And this is before, mouse look.
Oh, jeez.
So
sounds rough.
Yeah.
I kind of hope that next year they have Catacombs: The Dark Descent, just because I want to show you that one.
Yeah, it's pre-Wolfenstein 3D first-person game.
Well, they might have it. I know you could ask people to set up games on. It's not like each computer has one set game. I saw some of them had menus for various games, so they might have emulators and stuff from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to point out that PC gaming, I only really got into that. Let's see, I picked up Diablo 2, for when I went to Greece. So that was in 2008. So I missed a lot of there's also StarCraft, but that was pretty simple to set up. So I missed all the full registered version of games, all the shareware games, unless another friend had it. But I missed all of that because I was mostly like console, up to that
the
point.
two of us basically just console gamers until very recently. I still, for the most part, am.
I have to say, though, our cats actually managed to kill our Nintendo system, and we never got another actual gaming system. So, yeah, cat sleeping on it, turns out it chokes on cat hair and dies.
Oh.
So we played PC games pretty much constantly. I also never saw the full register version of pretty much anything, but lots and lots of shareware titles.
So yeah, and a lot of the snobs are like, PC games better. I'm like, console games were just much easier to set up.
Yeah, you stick in the cartridge, it worked.
Yeah.
You might have to blow on it sometimes, but
Part of keeping a game, really making it live is accessibility. Like I found the requirements of when it came out, I found the requirements for the game Crisis a bit insane. Since there's only
Nothing ran Crisis when Crisis came out.
Yeah, nothing ran Crisis except for what they rendered it with. And I saw a demonstration by LGR and like very choppy frame rate, like 15.
Jesus.
And with a little subtitle, this was acceptable when this game came out. So you need, if you really want to get a game popular, it needs to be accessible. And that was just ridiculous at the time.
Yeah, so that's always the advantage I've had with consoles, at least up until the recent thing. If you bought a PlayStation 2 and bought a PlayStation 2 game, it was going to work. You didn't need to make sure the sound driver was up to date or update. Now you have to do updates. But for the most part, you put the disc in, it works. You don't have to configure it. So
I actually remember we got Morrowind for Christmas and actually weren't able to play it until almost Easter just because we didn't have a graphics card that would handle it.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. So, yeah, not that problem with the Nintendo. You just got to watch out for the cat hair. Okay, so, also talking about, the bands at MAGFest. Again, we mentioned these in the video. The three that I mainly saw this year were Amanda Lepre, Viking Guitar, and the Sonic Adventure Music Experience, which included like the lead guitarist from Crush 40. So that was a pretty good show. I also saw during the Wizard Party Steel Samurai, which a lot of the bands are there's almost a glut of like the heavy metal style bands. So lately I've kind of been drawn toward more acoustic or just unique stuff. One of the bands I saw this year. Shoot, what was her name? I'll come up with it later. But other stuff that I've come up with is like Super Guitar Brothers, the Triforce Quartet, Warp Zone, bands that, what was it? It was the one we were listening to on the way home. Bands that don't just default to, okay, here's a heavy metal guitar riff on Legend of Zelda. They do different songs. They do newer songs. Super Soul Brothers. That's what it was. That's the new one, and it's kind of like a jazzy mix of rock and roll. And I've found myself more going toward those. Although I still like the rock stuff. The Megas are probably one of my favorite bands. I do mostly Mega Man stuff, but I believe they're coming out with have come out with a Castlevania album. And the One-Ups, they're a more jazzy version, and I like any of them that can give a unique spin on it. The Megas in particular and Master Sword, they add lyrics and almost a story to the songs they're singing. So that's something you don't see too often. A lot of your covers are just straight up just the instrumental version, because a lot of video game music just does not have vocals, and it's hard to write vocals to a song that already exists. So I give all the props to the Megas and Master Sword for being able to do that, and I highly recommend both of them.
Well, I think we should say special thanks to Amanda Lepre who
she retweeted us.
Yeah, she retweeted us, and we were very happy to put that up, and good luck.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite artists, and so yeah. And anything else we want to say in conclusion?
This is Jack Burton. No, I already did that about a
You
million
did that
times.
already.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us,
Yep.
Eva. And
Oh, thanks for having me.
Our special guest and one of the 5 listeners we have.
yeah. All right, this is Mike Curley,
And this is Frank Curley.
This is Eva Bakshis.
and this has been the C Team.
Hen, 2 ducks, 3 squawking geese, 4 limerick oysters, 5 corpulent porpoises, 6 pair of Don Alvarez's tweezers,